Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we begin a 4-day program, which we're calling the Moonshot Mission for Men, which is about how men in the world today can improve their health and well-being. We started these discussions back in November of 2021 when we did a 10-program series on what we call the masculine dialogues. And during that time, one of the participants, Jed Diamond, who we'll be introducing more fully in just a moment, participated and brought to our attention very exciting emerging research that was indicating that the genetic differences between men and women were very significant, and that in every country around the world, men are living shorter lives than women. And part of the dialogue that we convened at that time was really looking at the challenges that are confronting men in the world today. Most of the mass shooters are men. Many of the challenges of young teenage boys are very unique and very specific. And there has not been the kind of research and attention that has been paid to some of the real work that young men and mature men need to do in order to function more fully and in a harmonious way in our culture. So starting back then, we began to place our attention on how could Humanity Rising offer a unique contribution to the work that men need to do around the world today, not only to increase their longevity, but as I indicated, to live and work and be more cooperative and more harmonized, not only with women, but with each other in a world of escalating chaos and turbulence, which we see all around us. And so that has been incubating. We've had a number of programs on Humanity Rising that have been dealing with these issues. And today, in partnership with Jed Diamond and his organization, Men Alive, we're convening another program that we hope will provide all of us with deeper insight into both the distinctions between men and women and how men can learn from women and do so in a way that brings harmony and well-being. So that's our program over the next 4 days. It's going to be a very full program. And to start our session today, I want to introduce Molly, who's a psychosomatic practitioner and part of the Moonshot for Mission team, who will give us our opening practice and then make the introductions. And then I'll circle back, as I usually do, toward the end for a deeper dialogue. But welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this very important program. Molly?
Thank you, Jim, for the wonderful introduction of our mission. I just want to invite everybody to maybe spend a couple of minutes centering ourselves, grounding ourselves, being more present before we start with the program. So the invitation, if it feels right, is maybe to close your eyes or just soften your gaze, or maybe look straight into a point in your room. And I'll invite you to maybe just focus on where your feet are making contact with right now. Maybe that's the ground. So just noticing what's the contact that your feet are making with any surface right now. And maybe just notice how you're breathing as you notice the contact of your feet with the surface. Maybe inviting now an awareness of your calves, an awareness of the back of your thighs. And maybe just notice how your seat is making contact with anything right now, how your bum is making contact with the seat or the sofa or the bed, whatever you are right now. And just notice how that feels overall. What's it like to be supported right now? And maybe just notice if you can give in into gravity a little bit more. Maybe including some awareness of your lower back and your upper back. Maybe noticing your hands and whatever they're making contact with right now. And maybe including now your forearms and your upper arms. Noticing all of the support that's available for you right now from whatever is holding you. That can be your chair, your bed, your sofa, the floor. Maybe now including your shoulders and your neck into your awareness. And your whole head now. And noticing your face as well and your jaw. And just to close, just see what's it like to receive that support. All of the support that's available for you right now. And maybe stay with that for a few seconds. What's it like to receive the support that's available right now? And in your own time, at your own pace, we'll invite you to come back into the Zoom room. And I'll invite Dr. Jed Diamond and Joe Conrad to introduce the next part of our program.
Well, thank you, Molly. That was wonderful. I think we all need to reconnect with our bodies, to ground ourselves in the world. These are challenging times, I think, for everybody. I'm Dr. Jed Diamond, and thank you, Jim, for the introduction and for this continuing dialogue and for the launch of something new and exciting, which I'm very happy to be part of. I'm the founder of Men Alive, and I've been doing this work for about 50 years. And my focus over that time is to help men and their families to live fully authentic lives, to love deeply and well, and to make a positive difference in the world. And I feel that focusing on men's mental, emotional, and relational health can really be the key factors in not only helping men, but helping women, children, families, the community of life on planet Earth, and really the whole community that we all are a part of. And in 2021, I invited a number of colleagues who you are going to meet today to join me. And all of the people I invited were at the time doing really exceptionally good work in the field. And I felt like if we could join together, we could do something that would really, really make a difference in the world. And what we call it, and what I invited people to join, was we called it our Moonshot for mankind and humanity. And the idea of this was to bring together the best of who we have been over these years, the practices that we know work, and now to launch this to the world. So we're inviting you all now to join us. And as Jim said, over these next 4 days, you're going to hear more from each of us. Today, I'm going to be talking about the moonshot in a moment. But to give you a feel for this, I'd like to introduce one of our founding members, Joe Conrad, to give you a more of a sense of what the moonshot is that we are now bringing to the wider community. So Joe, take it away from here.
Thank you, Jed. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Conrad. I'm the founder and CEO of Cactus, which is a full-service advertising agency that does a lot of behavior change and social marketing work. And also, about 8 years ago, I founded a behavioral health software company called Grit Digital Health. And I have been really honored to be a part of this Moonshot for Mankind. And it's amazing to think about what a group of passionate, committed individuals can do by working together and collaborating. It was just 19 months ago when I first met Jed Diamond, and he invited me to join this group of mavericks and mavens, really looking to try to bring together our collective work and our vision, and how do we get a movement like this off the ground? And I think what really attracted me to it, first of all, was just the gravity of the issue and the fact that not as many people were aware of it or talking about it as they should be. And I think that this is actually the perfect time in our history to launch a moonshot for mankind. There's a lot more, I think, growing awareness of the importance of this issue. And I think what our group was trying to do is to bring it to a focal point. How could we really create a brand, a way to have a gathering place and a hub to share information and to collaborate, to take this idea of people coming together with a common vision and mission, and how can we better work together? This idea that there's strength in numbers, and if we could really advance this issue by inviting others to join us, that might be a pretty powerful thing. So bringing our team together, our founding members, we met over a series of months to really try to figure out the best way forward to get this moonshot off the ground. And we really focused in the last 6 months on developing a brand, a website that could serve as a hub, a gathering place for this movement, and then also a brand manifesto video that could really capture the essence of the issue, why we're doing this, why it's important, and inviting other people to join us. So I would like to just take a few minutes and share with you our Moonshot for Mankind campaign. I'm sharing my screen here. And I'm hoping everybody can see it okay. Confirmation that you can see my Moonshot for Mankind landing page. Good deal. Okay. So our team at Cactus really worked together with the founding group to create the brand Moonshot for Mankind. And how do we tell our story in a simple, succinct, and powerful way? So we really applied the craft of creating brands and great concepts and production quality and a good digital experience. And we didn't want to cut any corners in applying our craft for the Moonshot for Mankind. So we created this really wonderful, elegant brand and a little bit of a story on the landing page about the story behind the Moonshot for Mankind that Jed's going to tell us more about. But then we also wanted to create a video that could really capture what the movement was all about. And there's so much you can do with film and imagery and music, and also a great script and voiceover. And so this is about a 2-minute video that really describes the Moonshot for Mankind. So I'd like to play it now.
To be having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, my apologies. I don't know why it's not playing. I tested it earlier. I'm gonna try and I had it queued up somewhere else just in case this would happen. Let's try this one.
There.
the ultimate work in progress, constantly growing and evolving, contributing and accomplishing. But the path of progress is imperfect. And right now, we're experiencing a setback. Today, in every country across the globe, men live sicker and die younger than women. They're graduating at lower rates, being imprisoned more frequently, and are suffering from stress, depression, loneliness, alcoholism, substance abuse, and disease. Their pain is manifesting in acts of self-harm, suicide, violence, and destruction. The problems of individual men, when amplified, become the problems of all mankind, threatening not only our progress, but our very survival.
Are all systems go. You have permission to launch.
But if each man's problems and pains have the ability to cause exponential damage, it must also be true that each man who commits himself to living mentally, physically, and emotionally healthier has the power to create exponential good. This is how we change the narrative. This is our moonshot for mankind. We believe man's mental, emotional, and relational health is the key to empowering men to live long and well. So our mission is to help men live healthier, happier, more cooperative lives, fulfilling lives of purpose and productivity, where men are supported and valued as they make positive contributions to their families, friends, and communities. When that happens, families grow stronger, communities prosper, and humanity takes its next leap forward.
We have liftoff.
Together, we are an ever-expanding force for the good of all mankind, fueled by the commitments of individual men, bolstered by the support of their loved ones, and multiplied by millions of men across the globe. The journey to heal humanity has begun. Join us and imagine what we can accomplish.
So this is our Moonshot for Mankind world premiere today. And if you go to moonshotformankind.com or .org, either one will get you to the same place. You can read more about the campaign. And then it really is about increasing awareness. We want people to just get more information, to reflect on it. But then we're asking people to join the movement as individuals or as organizations. Then we also have an amazing, wonderful pledge that our own Frederick Marks crafted for both individuals and organizations. So people can take the pledge, and really it's a place where people can join, can network and collaborate. And we really hope to add thousands of organizations and millions of men and their loved ones to this effort. So with that, Jed, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you.
Lead us through your session today on Long Live Men.
Thank you, Joe. So you all have a treat in store. I think you get a feel for what the Moonshot is, and Joe and his team have created, I think, a fantastic film introduction to what we're about. Just to give you a sense of what the rest of this day will be and the subsequent days, I will be giving a little keynote talk, a short little talk about my work in the Moonshot and how that came to be. There'll be a panel that will come on where you'll meet the other founding members of the Moonshot, in addition to Joe and Male. There'll be a Q&A, so you can post questions or comments in the chat, and we'll be able to engage with you more specifically. And then each subsequent day, there'll be other keynotes and a similar format. So let me just share for
Dr.
you
Jed?
my own.
Yeah, can we just get
sorry.
Joe's screen
Yeah.
off?
Oh, sorry, where are we?
We just
Yeah,
want
just
Joe to take down his screen.
I'm
you.
trying to, and I can see everybody's faces, but I've lost the command that has the share screen.
Okay, we'll get that fixed.
There should be a stop share at the bottom of your screen
No,
there.
I know that's disappeared when I started sharing. All I can see is the
Try
gallery.
pressing escape because maybe it made it full screen and then it should come back.
Yeah, it's not. I'm trying escape. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Georg, do you know if you can stop sharing or Jim
Georg,
as the
can you
host?
help all?
I think one of you as host can take over the screen. Or Joe, you might want to hop off and hop back on if we can't figure out any other way.
The joys of technology, we all have to live with it. Part of the journey, my friends.
Do you want to just hop off, Joe, and then come back on the link that you came on?
That's what I will do.
Okay.
There, now I can see
There
it.
we go.
Okay.
Okay,
Perfect.
so am I back on? I just checking in
You are
with
on,
everybody.
Jed.
It's all
Yes,
you.
you're on, Jed. Go for
All
it.
right, my friends, here we are. So I'd like to just share a little bit about my own journey, and I want to start with a quote Mark Twain said, and I really love this. He said, "The two most important days of our lives are the day we were born and the day we found out why." So for me, I was born December 21st, 1943. And my parents were sure I was going to be a girl. So they had girls' toys, dolls, every names picked out. And when I arrived and the doctor shared, Mr. and Mrs. Diamond, you have a healthy boy, it was a shock to them, to everybody, I presume to me as well, although I probably didn't know the conflicts going on. So I really grew up wondering and interested in what is it about us that makes us male or female. The why for me came on November 21st, 1969, when I held our newborn son, Jemal, in my arms for the first time. And I made a promise to him that I would be a different kind of father than my father was able to be for me, and to do everything I could to create a world where fathers were fully healthy in body, mind, and spirit, and were fully engaged with their families. And 3 years later, we had a daughter, Angela. And that was the beginning for me of Men Alive, which was kind of my window to the world, where I began to share the things that I was learning and that I thought were helpful for people to make the lives that we all wanted, to understand these fairly complicated and interesting issues of what does it mean to be a man or a woman in today's world. My first book, Inside Out, Becoming My Own Man, came out in 1983. And in the book, I shared some of the people whose work I felt like had enriched my life and helped me understand a lot about sex and gender issues. And one was a book called I'm trying to remember the title. Let me check my notes here. I know it's somewhere. Yes, The Feminine Mystique, Betty Friedan. And what the feminine mystique taught me was what the contribution of the feminist and women's movement was to my life. Because what I read in the feminine mystique and the beginning of the the feminist revolution at that time, was that really the issues that women were facing were not so different than what men were facing, but from a different side. So feminism really felt to me like my world too, my change, my liberation. And the second book that I spoke to, and a hero of mine was named Herb Goldberg. And he wrote a book called The Hazards of Being Male. I still have the book. And what he said in the book really touched me. He said, the male has paid a heavy price for his masculine privilege and power. He is out of touch with his emotions and his body, and he is playing by the rules of the male game plan. And with lemming-like purpose, he is destroying himself emotionally, psychologically, and physically. That was written in 1976. And I think part of the sensibility of the Moonshot is that these issues of male disability and disconnection not only were true then, but in many ways have gotten worse through the years. And that the need to bring men and women together for this focus on men's mental, emotional, and relational health, we feel is this bold and in some ways unattainable, except through united effort to really change how men's health not only impacts the men, but impacts women, children, families, and communities. So I'd like to have us just take a moment in the same way that Male had us tune into our bodies and ground, to think about a specific male in your life who may need, or is not as healthy in body, mind, and spirit as you would like. It could be a father, it could be a husband, could be a brother, a son, grandchild, friend. And just think about what would it take, what would be needed for this person. It could be you, it could be me, it could be somebody you know very closely. What would it take to have the resources and the support and the engagement and the bringing together of our hope and our future to have that person get better, to feel better, to know that they're loved, cared, and supported? So part of, I think, what we're hoping today, and what I want to begin now to begin the dialogue, starting with the other members of our Moonshot for Mankind, that will be for this moment respondents, and to share your own experiences with what I've shared and take off from what I've shared, and hopefully now to open this dialogue with all of you. So feel free again to post any questions or comments in the chat to begin now. What we know is working together, and this is, I think, if there's any one message from, I think, the Moonshot launch, is that helping to focus on men's mental, emotional, and relational health can make a difference in what my colleague Charles Eisenstein said, to create the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. So respondents and the other members of the panel, this is a time now for you to jump in to share whatever is alive for you as we continue to now open this dialogue with everyone.
Thanks so much, Dr. Jed. So maybe I'll be calling on each of our members, and we'll ask you maybe to introduce yourselves briefly and maybe then answer Dr. Jed's question in response to his keynote. What do you see will forward this aspect of men's health? So Frederick, might we start with you?
Well, thank you. It's a real honor and privilege to be here with you all today and with my esteemed colleagues. We've looked forward to this moment for quite a while and done a lot of hard work to make it possible. So it's just really fun to be here with you all. Jed, your wonderful talk got me thinking about how it might be interesting for each of us to tell a little bit of our own founding story, sort of what it is that brought us to this task of being interested in men's overall well-being. So, I certainly don't want to usurp time that could otherwise be used for all of our wonderful listeners to join the conversation. So we'll certainly be monitoring the chat windows and for pressing questions and concerns that you might have, but assuming for the moment that we have enough time, it'd be great, I think, for each of us to just take a couple minutes and go back into our story. So for me, that began really when I was 9, and my father died very, very suddenly. He had a heart attack. He was 41 years old. He was there one day and then gone forever the next. So on the way to the funeral, my uncle, his younger brother, he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Well, Freddie, you're the man of the house now. And you better believe that as dysfunctional a statement as we all sort of vaguely, or hopefully more than vaguely, know that to be today, no 9-year-old boy can be a man of the house." At the same time, I took that in very, very deeply. And of course, I wanted to be that man. I wanted to support my mother. I wanted to support my older sister and younger brother. And I had no clue how to do that. And of course, he didn't stick around to show me. And no other men of my father's friends or colleagues stuck around to show me. So I had no mentorship as a boy. And I had no meaningful initiation into mature adulthood for men. And I desperately longed for that. So in brief, that's what began my journey into this work. And so for the last 25 years or more, I've been arguably obsessed with defining for myself what defines mature masculinity and how do we as men get there. So I'll leave it at that and make room for others. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Frederick. Lisa, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And again, I'm so filled with gratitude to be here. It's an amazing group we have. And I can see from the chat that there are so many people out there that are interested in these ideas and are active. And we also encourage you to put any questions for after this little round of intros. We'll have plenty of time to answer questions that people have. So I'm Lisa Hickey. I am publisher of the Good Men Project and founder and CEO of Good Men Media. And the Good Men Project was launched in 2010 with the idea of sparking an international conversation about the changing roles of men in today's society. And I'll be giving a keynote tomorrow along with Joe Conrad. And I'll be talking a little bit more about the Good Men Project and what we do and how we grow and how we built a platform and how we've connected. We've gotten to the point now where we have 2 to 3 million people every month coming to the website and being a part of this conversation in some way. But Frederick, thank you for putting out there the sort of founding story of how we came to be involved in this work and how that led to our real passion that our group has for this Moonshot mission for man and really trying to figure out how to close that mortality gap between men and women and how to help men live healthier, more productive, more longer, better connected lives. And so, as a woman, I had worked in traditional advertising agencies. They had been sort of a Mad Men type of environment. I felt like I was always fighting to make my way up in a man's world, and it was hard. I was raising 4 kids. I was working all the time. And then when I met with the founder of the Good Men Project, a man named Tom Matlack, and Tom was an ex-venture capitalist who had taken some time off to write a book about men, and he was collecting essays from men all over the place, and he asked them to just talk about a defining moment in their lives. And I had been brought on to use my marketing expertise to help him launch the book and get it out there to the world. And so Tom told me about the stories he was collecting from men, and how, whether it was the man who had watched his son die from a drug overdose, or couldn't understand why his wife was divorcing him, or just like learning how to not be the type of father that his father was. And as Tom was talking to me, I had this epiphany, and it was, oh, men have problems too. And I don't know why it took me decades to realize that I didn't have to fight with men to make my way up in the world. It was more important to connect with them, to listen to them, to understand our joint problems, to really focus on what we can do collectively as humanity and figure this out together. And so when Jed talked about this Moonshot mission and closing the mortality gap between men and women, it was like, this was right up my alley. This was part of what we've been doing with the Good Men Project for all these years, but now it had a new, more specific focus. So I am thrilled to be here with everyone, and I'm looking forward to questions. I'm looking forward to interaction with you out there in the audience, and thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you, Lisa. And Shayna, how about you?
Thank you, Male. I just want to acknowledge that I've been, looking at the chat, and there are some questions, and we will get to all of those after this. I'd love to, we want to keep welcoming your perspectives and your questions, so keep bringing them, and we will return to them. And I have been a relationship coach, mostly relationship coach. I do some leadership work and some business work as well. But mostly with men for the past 20 years on the relationship coaching side. And so I've gotten to see, it's really been an incredible honor to see the vulnerability and the struggles, that men face. I feel like I have a front row seat in a way that many women or people of other genders, who don't identify as men or male, really don't often get to see. And thank you, Frederick, again for, inviting these founding stories, because I think for me, when I was in my 20s and I was part of an intentional community, I was invited to participate in a workshop where I got to give loving and honest feedback to men who were struggling in their dynamics or their relationships with women. And before that, I had, I think, a very immature view. And, I'd had my own struggles with men and had some ideas about how all men are, or, what men are capable of in relationships and emotional availability and all those things. And through getting to facilitate these workshops and to be in the trenches, it felt like, with men in their deepest pains and struggles, it blew my mind open and my heart open to be able to see, like Lisa said, oh my God, you know, men struggle in ways I never would have imagined because I had kind of othered men and been aware of my own struggles. So it's been an incredible ride, I would say, to be able to learn to love men in a way that I hadn't necessarily, you know, foreseen in my life, and to have incredible relationships with colleagues and friends and family and, you know, romantic partners where we are actually getting to understand each other. So I really look forward. I know sometimes people say, well, as a woman, why are you doing this? And what's your, you know, what's your motivation here? And men need men. And there are too many women in the world already, you know, working with men. And I fully believe that men need men and men's groups and healing. And what I also see is that there's another type of healing that happens between men and women. So thank you all for being here for this conversation and for joining us in our passion. And I look forward to all that we can do together.
Thank you, Shayna. And Joe.
Thank you, Male, and thank you, Shayna. That was wonderful. Frederick, great audible on having us each kind of share our story of what got us here. I think that is really great for me to, even though I know most of the stories, to hear them again is wonderful. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. And the reason Jed Diamond reached out to me just about 2 years ago was because of a campaign that we created called Man Therapy, Therapy the Way a Guy Does It. And so it's a campaign that he had just recently became aware of, even though we launched the campaign in 2012. And so that's how an ad guy kind of got involved in behavioral health and men's mental health. So my story, real briefly, I mentioned I started an ad agency in Denver, Colorado in 1990. And it was from day one focused on a purpose-driven mission of really growing brands that help people thrive. So I really believed in the power of communications, and that really great communications and crafting of that message and how it gets communicated could be a really powerful force and solve any issue. It was in 2010 when we were approached by the Colorado Department of Suicide Prevention about taking on the issue of suicide among working age men. And after we looked at the issue, I actually really felt like we had met our match. I thought, you know, can an ad campaign, could a website possibly impact such a complex and dark issue of suicide? And so like we always do, we put our process to work of belief and behavior design, really trying to understand the issue. We did a deep dive with suicidologists. We talked to survivors of suicide and loved ones of people who had suicided, and really tried to understand this dynamic. And from there, our team just applied what we do as far as strategic insights and decided to create a platform where therapy could happen, where we could really normalize the experience. And then we needed to create a campaign that would break through the stigma of men's mental health, get guys and their loved ones to lean in and think that, oh, maybe this is something useful. Maybe therapy is accessible, and it's something that I can find what that might mean for me. And so in 2012, we launched Man Therapy as a turnkey suicide prevention campaign. And we're very fortunate the New York Times wrote an article about it, and suddenly developed kind of this following around the world. And here, 12 years later, we have kept the campaign going. And, you know, it really is about not just suicide prevention, right? The big aha was the best defense is a good offense. And it's all about early intervention and prevention. And if we could do more to get guys thinking about their mental health more early on and more proactively, and get all guys to think that, you know, this is something, no matter where you are on that continuum, this is something you should think about and figure out what's important for you. So our journey with Man Therapy has really been an incredible one. And it's led to, you know, other partnerships like the ones that we've developed behind the Moonshot for Mankind. So like my colleagues here, very honored and grateful to be a part of this campaign.
Thank you, Joe, and everyone. And for me, I think this interest in gender issues started at a very early age. I'm Mexican American. Both my parents are Mexican, and I was raised in Mexico. So there's still a lot of very traditional male and female roles here in the country. So since a very early age, I remember kind of asking this question to myself, like what does it mean to be a woman? Because I would see my mother being very submissive, my father being very dominant, and I just felt drawn to living more like my father in a way, because it seemed like that was more fun. Like he got to go out, have friends, make money, while mom was just at home and sad and overwhelmed. So I couldn't just identify as a woman since a very early age. And yeah, growing up, that really created a lot of confusion and different issues for me. And I think I got a little experience. I mean, of course, never at the level of someone who is biologically male and identifies as a man, but I got a little experience of what it was like to live from that idea of I can dominate others, I can take advantage of others, I can just work is what defines me, my goals are what define me, and all of that. So I reached a point of overwhelm and illness, and I was like, well, this is not necessarily the way I want to live life. And I started searching for different options to heal, especially to understand me as a woman. Like, what does it mean to me to be a woman? And that led me to see that there are just so many resources for women, fortunately, to heal. There are a lot of circles of women, a lot of empowerment, a lot of people doing all of that work. But then I started asking myself this question, like, what's happening for men in a time of history where we are so focused on helping women, which is awesome, but who's focusing on men? Who's actually seeing what are they struggling with? What do they need? And I just started looking for people who were doing that. And I just became passionate and discovered a calling there. I discovered that I really wanted to support the movement. And through my journey, I also discovered somatic healing. I am currently a body-oriented coach for men. And I've seen the difference. When I first started coaching in 2017, I was just doing transformational coaching. So we were working at a very mind level. And there were some amazing conversations we were having, but not many breakthroughs and changes in their lives with my clients. But after inviting the body into the conversation, changes started to be more tangible. And I just became so passionate about this idea of we are whole beings. We have a feminine force, we have a masculine force. And the more we can work together with those forces individually and collectively, that's really where the healing happens. And that's where the integration and the wholeness is. So I have a project called Male Wholeness, which is all about coaching men and holding men's groups for men that include embodiment. And I'm just really passionate of this work. I met Dr. Diamond on 2020 when I was creating an open forum to talk about all of this. I called it gender consciousness, and it was all about bringing men and women and everyone in between to have these conversations and to really not try to fight patriarchy through matriarchy, but actually create a partnership and create a world where all of us, no matter our genders and our identities, we can be together and help each other. So that's what brought me to this Moonshot for Mankind mission. I'm very honored to be part of this group. And I want to invite Jim now to maybe join us, maybe share your reflections, Jim, after all we've shared, and to engage in a conversation with our group.
Well, thank you, Molly, and thank you all. It's been fascinating just sitting here listening to your various stories. And first, I just want to say to you, Molly and Shana, how delighted and I think important it is for women to be in on this discussion and this therapeutic pathway for men, that it's not just simply a matter as the women have had to do and to a large extent over the last 75 years of sort of pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. Men, I think, actively need the support and help of women in this endeavor. And I think, Jed, you've really envisioned that from the very beginning. So I just wanted to note that this is a human enterprise to bring both sexes and both genders, all genders, into the same fullness of their humanity, however that humanity is manifesting itself. And I've just been noting some of the questions, one by Hans von Reitschote about sexuality and gender. And so I think it might be worth, particularly in this opening session, just to pause for a moment, and maybe starting with you, Jed, and then anyone else. You know, oftentimes there's a confusion between sexuality and gender. And one of the things that we're experiencing as a global phenomenon is that while we're, born male or female, the gender spectrum now is becoming quite extraordinarily complex and multifarious. So I thought it might be worth just in this opening conversation to make some comment on the distinction between sex and gender, and anything any of you would like to make about the transgender and the gender fluidity that's out there right now. And I guess for you, Jed, how this affects your Moonshot mission for men.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a complex question. I would just offer this kind of reflection and introduction for me. The last book that I wrote, it's called 12 Rules for Good Men, was inspired by my wife, who said we really need to have a dialogue of men and women to really look at what's good in men, how we can understand who we are, how we can work together. And one of the first things I did when I took that challenge was to ask myself and to see if I could find out how far back in evolutionary history do males and females go? Because we know back through animal kingdom, you have male deer, you have male every species. And it turned out, and there's a number of sources that say the sex difference from unicellular creatures that were dividing into two sister cells, they were called. At a certain point, sexuality was born in that we had two different cells that were, different and needed to come together to share genetic material. Turned out that history goes back 1 billion years. So there's 1 billion-year history of sexual difference in the universe. It's a long time. And we know now, and there's new research coming out all the time as we learn more about the genetics of male and female. And we know just simply that every person has a set of chromosomes, 46 pair, 46 individual, 23 pairs. One pair are the sex chromosomes that either is an XY if you're male, for most of us who are male, or XX if we're female. And that every cell in our body is sex specific. That is, for the males that are here, if you have an XY chromosome, that means something specific, both biologically and with health, that's different from if you have two X chromosomes. I don't go into detail of the genetics, but there's a difference between, as Jim says, the sex differences and what we call gender, which has a whole range of different qualities than just the differences in sex. And we now have a whole range of gender issues that are important and need to be discussed, but that doesn't negate the fact that there are also sex differences between males and females. It's a very interesting field. It's complex. In this one little segment, I don't think we can answer all the questions. The mystery has been going on for 1 billion years. Will go on a lot longer, but the truth is we all are interested and we all want to learn and we all want to find how we can be the people that we're meant to be. So that's my brief kind of intro to some of these very interesting issues that we're all dealing with.
Thank you, Jed. Anyone else want to comment?
I'd love to add something to that. I mean, I think it's been really powerful, Jed, to read your book, Long Live Men, and many of your other books, and and to recognize the difference biologically. And I think you've been talking a lot, Jed, about Marianne Legato and the health differences, right, that occur based on this different genetic material we have in our bodies. And I love the conversation about gender, and it's been, challenging me to actually let go of my absorbed ideas about who we are for the past probably 8 or so years, as my kid has been on a journey of exploring gender and gender fluidity and gender expansiveness. And so, yeah, just adding to what you said about the biology, I think the gender piece, we are a yes, and we're all exploring. We don't have a set, statement. But those of us here are, attempting to understand, attempting to really honor all beings and all people. And so, I was in the beginning of my career, I was doing a lot of work on, the masculine, feminine dynamics and man, women, and a lot of, heterosexual relationships. As a woman, when I coach men, it's mostly men who are in heterosexual relationships. But, I've gotten to really see that we don't have to genderize everything, right? There can be these qualities of leading and following. There can be qualities that we, no matter what gender we are, we get to embrace the full spectrum of qualities from every gender. So I think we do recognize that there are differences biologically, and that each person is a unique and amazing expression, and we welcome all of that. And so I know there's been a couple questions in the chat, and I look forward to, weaving that all in as we keep going with this.
Well, before we bring in other comments, I would like maybe to go a little deeper, Jed, on this sex differential, because I think it's worthy of note, because when certainly 50 years ago, when I started to learn about these things, it was believed that men and women were basically essentially the same, and that differences were basically cultural between different ethnicities and so forth. But the latest research is indicating that that's not, in fact, the case, that there is as much difference between the chromosomes and the genetics of a male and a female as between humans and the upper primates, a 98.5% differential. That's, in other words, that Jed and I, Frederick and Joe, have 99.999% similarity in our genetics, and so does Shayna, Lisa, and Molly. But the difference between the men and women on this call biologically is very significant. And it is that significant difference that is giving rise, you had mentioned, Shayna, Dr. Legato, who's now been pioneering a completely new field of what does this genetic difference imply for both disease and medical recovery. So one of the observations I would make that I think are worth exploring is that we're going in sort of opposite directions. We, on the one hand, we're going through all kinds of gender fluidity transformation. And on the other hand, we're finding out that the genetics indicate that there are real physical differences between men and women at the level of biology. And as Jed said, the fact that these XX or XY genes are in every cell in the body means that there's a cornucopia of research and interpretive therapeutic evaluations that I think make this field extremely exciting because these two vectors are happening simultaneously.
And I would say, Jim, just to build on that, that I don't think we're necessarily going in opposite directions, that at the very core, the truth will set us free. And all of us are continuing to develop a deeper sense of who we are as genetic, evolutionarily complex beings on the planet, and that within that, the gender idea and fluidity and new way to be, what that means within that sexual reality, doesn't mean that one sex is better than the other. That's been, the fear that and the truth for a lot of science through the years, that if you were different, that meant men were usually above and women were lower, and that needs to change. But we can also be different and fluid, and all of this. It makes it very interesting. It makes it very alive. And also it, as Shada has said, we're all exploring together. And we're all learning together. And we all have lives and children and grandchildren that mean a lot. And we all have to listen to each other more deeply. We all have to have dialogues like these, which is why we're doing this, and be able to realize together, with an open heart, open mind, open soul, together we will learn a lot that will make our lives and the lives of all of us better, which is what we all, I think, want and need.
Well, thank you. Frederick, Joe, any comments that you would like to add?
Well, thank you, Jim, but not really. I'm loving the discussion, and I'm, paddling as fast as I can to keep up. I'm a learner here too. I'm a student. So I think it's an important discussion, and I'm delighted that we're engaged in it.
I'll make one observation, and it's something that you alluded to, Jim, and you talked about the human experience. And I really think that that's what's most important here. When we talk about mental health and well-being and people thriving and flourishing, we want that for everybody, men and women. And, I think the gender discussion is a very important one to continue to have, but I think it's most important to remember that we're all human. And aside from our biological differences, think about the cultural differences of where you grow up in the world, or in the US, or the color of your skin, or, all the different influences the socioeconomics play. But at the end of the day, we all have to kind of look in the mirror and realize kind of where we are and where we need to evolve to, and how to do that. And oftentimes our behaviors, right, the behavioral health issues. And I think that it is important also sometimes to talk to men specifically, because you really want a message just for them. And I think that it's okay to do that, to be relevant to a certain population, but realizing that it really is, we're all connected and we're all in this together.
Yeah. Thank you. Lisa, any comment?
Yes, I'll just jump in and reiterate the yes and that everyone's been talking about, that yes, we can have biological differences in men and women, and yes, we can have differences in gender, which are more cultural society roles that are given to males versus females. But we can also have fluidity within both sex and gender, and we can embrace those, and we can understand those, and we can do all of that to create, I think, the complex piece of humanity that really is all of us. And so, for example, at the Good Men Project, what we tend to focus on is not so much the differences per se, but what we ask a lot is, what stereotypes are actually harming men? What are the stereotypes? We like to say we eat stereotypes for lunch, because there are certain ways that the culture has defined masculinity that I believe are actually leading to things like this gap in mortality between men and women. And so I still think that together figuring out these problems, these solutions, coming together, connecting is really the way forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Let's drill down on that for a moment, because I think you're raising a very important issue that's been expressed in some of the questions in the chat. But just as a general matter, to really look at some of the stereotypes and perceptions that are really blocking the kind of progress that we know is possible. And maybe starting with you, Frederick, I was struck by your opening story that here you were just going along as a little boy, your dad dies, and the next thing you know, your uncle saying, Frederick, you're the man of the house now. And the implications of that are actually staggering, given the stereotypic functions at play in the culture at that time. And all of us as men, went through different experiences where we were shaped by even a small comment, but it was carrying sort of a genetic memory of thousands of years of patriarchy and the awareness just in the ether of what it meant to be a man. So maybe starting with the men, I'd love to hear a comment on Lisa's point about if you had to choose one or more of the stereotypes or obstacles that are a particular challenge now, as you observe it in the world out there, what would they be to men's health and well-being?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in on that. Thanks, Jim. When my uncle made that comment to me and planted what would be a seed for unfolding throughout the entirety of my life, what is it to be that man, to support and love, my mother and sister and brother? How do I do that? All of the models that were offered me by the dominant culture were already dated and becoming more and more out of date. It was the John Wayne model, right?
Yeah.
Suck it up, be silent, don't express emotion. If you feel pain, don't ever show it or share it. All kinds of things that, in this day and age almost seem laughable. Here we are 60 years later. So, for me, well, forgive me if I'm going to sort of venture in partially into slightly different territory, but I realized I was remiss, unlike my colleagues, in not actually fully introducing myself and my work and more of my background. But I'm going to try to weave it in with how I came to get answers to this question of what could be a new model of masculinity for myself as I move into adulthood. So, as I said, I had nobody who showed up during my teen years to mentor and initiate me into mature masculinity. And I desperately felt a need for that, even if I was completely incapable of articulating that need. And so it wasn't until I was 39 years old, and I want to mention this partly because it's an opportunity to shout out to my Mankind Project brothers who are out there today, I know, that I did what was, for me, what I considered my long overdue initiation into mature masculinity. I did a weekend workshop through the Mankind Project called the New Warrior Training Adventure in October 1995 in Chicago. And that introduced me for the first time to sort of a comprehensive system for understanding what constitutes mature masculinity in the 21st century. It occurs to me now that I should probably shift my planned remarks for Friday into talking about that, drilling down and defining it. But that's for an offline conversation. So, but part of what impressed me about that event was having over 60 men show up to actually teach me, to actually take me by the hand and say, okay, we're going to show you now what it means to be the man that you've always wanted to be. And that in itself was profoundly moving to me, because as I said, nobody showed up for me when I was young. So, and it makes me hearken back to Shayna's comment too. There are times that I think it's appropriate for men to gather in seclusion to teach other men how to be men, how to step into that mature masculine. And then there's times that it's not appropriate, that we need to mix both men and women into that conversation. So, that began the journey for me in a way, and well, it sort of jettisoned me to a whole new level of understanding. And so I started what has been for me 25 years of making films and now writing books about this issue, about what defines mature masculinity, what does initiation and mentorship mean. I made a TV miniseries called Boys to Men ? And I looked at 15 and 16-year-old boys and how they were struggling to define the goal that they were seeking, crossing that threshold into mature adulthood. And I've made many, many other films. And I also wrote a book called Rights to a Good Life, where I put my 25 years of learning down on paper and defined mature masculinity, defined what initiation and mentorship of teens actually means. So all of those things for me have sort of led me to where I am now, where I can actually consider myself a colleague of these wonderful folks who, in a sense, have been doing this professionally, even though my day job is still a filmmaker. I actually, step reasonably confidently into discussions like this, and find, that I actually have contributions that I can make. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
That's a good point, Frederick. Most of us were never coached about what manhood even was. We just kind of emerged into a kind of a patriarchal cultural mindset and kind of coped as we could.
Let me just build on Jim, what you said and what Frederick just said and the others, that for me, if I was looking at one cultural box that we've been put in, of many of us that grew up as male, it's the idea that we are the something, the man of the family now. I lost my father also when I was young, and I thought I needed to be the separate person, and I had to do it myself. And I think what Frederick is recognizing, what I and all of us, is that really there are no separate people. There are no separate beings. We are part of a community. We are connected to others. And that's what Frederick does through his films, and we all do through our various things, is to reconnect with ourselves, that part of us that said we can only be a certain way, can't have these feelings, only those feelings, and that we must be separate. We can't connect with other men because we're competitive. We can't connect with other women because, they're different. So that's I think the gift that we are all recognizing in our lives, sharing with each other in our little community, and now broadening this dialogue for others. And I just want to say, I see a number of questions, and I want to just answer one specifically, which is a question of, if sex can't be changed, why do we even talk about sex differences? And I think there's two answers about that for me. One is that by talking about sex, being male or being female, having XY chromosomes or XX. It's part of accepting who we are and who we are at our essence. And the reason we also talk about it is because not only are there cultural things that make us either less human, there are also biological things that get in the way of us being fully human, like having two X chromosomes, we find out, if you're female, protects against a lot of illness and disease, that only having one X chromosome and a Y chromosome makes us more biologically susceptible to problems, not only psychologically and socially susceptible, but biologically. So I think there's some good reasons to delve into these complex issues. So I'll turn it back to you all for continuing dialogue with the time we have.
So Joe, what the obstacles are up for you, or that you have encountered personally, or you think are prevalent in the culture now?
Well, we've come a long way in the past 10 years, I think, when it comes to men's mental health. But our approach when we created Man Therapy was actually to lean into the stereotype and use it to our benefit and use it in a humorous way. We always know that the men in our lives that often will use humor to deflect in a topic that they don't want to talk about. And we decided to turn the tables and use that strategy. And at the time, there was a much, I think, more significant stigma around men's mental health, that men didn't think they weren't engaging in online or in-person therapy. They don't have the same social networks that our women in our lives do. And so we really wanted to try to break through that and let guys know that even the toughest guys, using that stereotype of like the kind of macho guy. And so we created a fictional therapist, Dr. Rich Mahogany, and he's a guy's guy, right? He tells it like it is. And he's the hardest working therapist in the world. He's had 2 million men in his office. He's dispensed 500,000 head inspections, but he does it in a humorous way. He has some crass language that he uses, and he's kind of part football coach, part drinking buddy, and he'll give you a kick in the butt, but he's also a trained therapist who really cares about your mental health. And so I think it was taking that kind of approach and being a little bit absurd about it is what's made it so highly engaging, to let guys know that this is a place where they can come to be men, and that therapy is natural. It's one of the manliest things that you can do. And there's a lot of ways it comes in many forms, and there's a lot of ways you can participate in that. So we actually leaned into it and took it the other direction. And, that campaign is evolving, but I think we struck a chord there.
Thank you. Dr. Mahogany. That sounds really grounded. It's a well-chosen name. Now I'd like to just turn to the women, starting with you, Shana. Lisa, Molly, as you view it as women, given your involvement in men, what would you say are the primary obstacles that you observe in men's pathway to fullness? Shana.
You want me to start? Okay. I agree with most of what's been said. I acknowledge someone said, not to necessarily to say we in the chat, right? Because if I say we, I'm speaking for who knows who. I will say that I have been raised with so many different stereotypes and ideas of who I should be as a woman and who a man should be as a man. And now, we're blowing it all out of the water with the gender spectrum and all of that. And so I'll say, from what I've seen coaching and supporting men over the years, that man box and the idea of men are supposed to, like Frederick said, men are supposed to suck it up. Men are supposed to be silent. Men are supposed, strength means go it alone, not asking for help. As opposed to, I think, a new sense that vulnerability actually is a strength. I often joke that many of the men I work with would happily jump out of a helicopter or kayak, white rapids, whatever you call that, right? Like they're all these terrifying experiences that many of the men I work with will face. And yet having a conversation that is emotional or vulnerable can be terrifying. And so I do see that, people who were raised male were conditioned in a certain way often, and people who are raised female were conditioned in a certain way. And I really, as my kid is blowing my mind as I'm exploring what gender actually is and all the ways that I've been conditioned, it does lead me to sometimes go down these thought experiments of, okay, what if as our kids came into the world, we weren't siloing them into these are the toys you can play with, and these are the thoughts you can have, and these are the ways you can interact. And, it's pretty wild that somebody wrote in the chat that gender really is a construct. And so I don't, again, I don't have a factual opinion on this, but I can see that the ways it's framed for us who we should be seems like one of the biggest deterrents to actually, being healthy and being ourselves.
Yeah, very good point. The culture itself can be the prison.
Yeah.
And the obstacle. Thank you for that. Lisa.
So I don't think this is necessarily the most important thing, but it's something that's been on my mind for a while. It's been kind of relevant in the news lately and just different things I've seen. And I actually mentioned it to everyone here in this group. And that is this idea that men and women can't be friends on a very deep, emotional, intimate level. So that I feel like there's this narrative in our society that, heterosexual men should go out and find one woman who's their soulmate to be an intimate partner with, and with that woman they share everything with. But having really deep, close relationships with other women just isn't something that gets out there and appreciated and is seen as helpful and healthy. And I really think that it is, like, actually being able to share your deepest and, vulnerable thoughts with people of both sexes and all genders, I think is really important. So again, I don't think it's the biggest issue facing men by any means, but I do think it's one worth noting.
Well, I think it's an important one. I mean, just think about how sexualized the male-female relationship has been. And so the notion of even having a woman and a man that are just good, deep friends is still an exception rather than commonplace.
Right.
And it's part of that cultural imprisonment that we're all victims of at some fundamental level, as Shana was pointing out. So thank you for that. Molly, what would be your comment on these matters?
Well, I maybe want to build on what Shana and Lisa have shared, like this idea of the stereotypes or these limiting beliefs, like the one Lisa just shared. And maybe I can talk from the perspective of the body. It's interesting because we can have these conversations, we can talk and we can realize, yeah, that's true. I mean, there's this social construct, there's all of these ideas, like Frederick was saying, like men gotta suck it up, they gotta go it alone, all of that. And we can understand it's not healthy, but it's not easy to just change by talking about it. It's not easy to just change by understanding that it's not healthy. There's an imprint in the body. And of course, this can be true for any gender expression, but the reality is that the way society has been raising men in general is it's more common to find that imprint there. So for a man, as Frederick was saying, talking about emotions in, like generally speaking, just because of the way we've been conditioned in society, there's going to be a somatic imprint. There's going to be something that will, even if they want to try to do it, and they understand that it would be healthy to do it, there's something going on in the subconscious and at a body level that will probably get in the way. So for me, that's why integrating the body in what we're doing right now is so important, because the healing has to start at this very rooted level, like really how do we help men to start, like sensing things and identifying feelings and being able to be more vulnerable and allow themselves to receive support, allow themselves to engage in relationships. So I really believe that not only speaking about this is important, but actually embodying and doing practices that can help men to have these experiences of what's it like and how does it feel to change the paradigm. So maybe that will be my share on this.
I'd like to just build on what y'all have said as we're getting towards the end of our time, because I'm aware the deeper we get into this, the more there is to say and the more there is to share. I'm trying to follow each other and look at some of the chat as we're going through. And there's obviously a lot that is still going to be happening. So I just want to mention at this point that there's going to be 3 additional days, which Jim mentioned, and that we will be continuing to engage, number 1. Number 2, our website is now up and live, moonshotformankind.com and .org, where you'll be able to engage more fully with us and we with you. So I just want to acknowledge there's so much more that people have been putting in the chat, they've been talking about that we haven't covered. And please know that it's not because we're not interested or we don't want to hear or we don't want to engage with you. I think it's obvious that we do, but we will be continuing to find ways. And this dialogue, hopefully what this group is recognizing, this is going to go on for a long time. We're committed to this work. We're here long term. We hope you will be too. I know Jim and Humanity Rising and his whole team is here long range. So bless you all for being part of this now. We'll continue with the time we have today, but we will have much more time in the next 3 days with our group, with Humanity Rising, and then with the Moonshot for Mankind. This will be rolling out over many years, and hopefully the partnerships that we've created thus far will expand out to the millions, literally, of individuals and organizations that we know want to be part of this dialogue.
Well, thank you, Jed, and that's probably a good moment to bring our first session to a close. I think, unless Shana, do you want to say anything about tomorrow's session?
Well, I'll also say that tomorrow, Lisa and Joe are going to be talking about men's physical and mental health. And then the next day I'm going to talk about, we'll give a short keynote like we did, and then we're going to have this panel and discussion. So Thursday, I'll give a short keynote on men's relational and emotional health. And then Frederick on Friday's keynote is on men's communal health. And then we'll keep having all of these conversations. I just want to acknowledge there's so much in the chat I was attempting to follow. And so please, like Jed said, if we didn't address it, it's not because we don't care. So we will do our best to circle around, and this is going to be a long-term conversation.
Thank you, Shana, Joe, Lisa, Jed, Frederick, Molly. This has been a wonderful opening session. And as we all have observed, the deeper one gets into this mystery of male and female and sex and gender, the more there is to say. And the more the questions emerge in response to which answers just beget more questions. So we want to just emphasize the holistic nature of this journey in the spirit of this audacious quest that Jed and his colleagues have birthed around a moonshot mission for mankind to bring men into a deeper awareness of themselves so that they can manifest a more healthy and abundant way of being, not only with themselves as men, but with women and the larger ecology. So we'll be getting into these questions and various issues more deeply over the next couple of days. But I want to thank the panel. I want to thank our participants. It's been a very, very energetic discussion today. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link that Stan has just put in the the chat box. You're all welcome to join for a more informal conversation. And then tomorrow we'll resume our dialogue for session number 2 of 4 sessions on this very important issue of a moonshot mission for men. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.